At our number 10 spot, we have booby traps. This war was infamous for Vietnam's use of guerrilla warfare on the US troops, but this came largely due to the fact that Americans invaded, locked, and loaded. Despite what many believe, the US outgunned and outmanned the communists, so they needed to find other ways to fight them. And their response was these intricate booby traps. These things were devastating, and just by the looks of it, I understand why US troops' morales were dropped completely down the drain after running into these. The jungle terrain was hard enough having to deal with hiding soldiers and underground tunnels, but imagine walking and running into some of these traps. Some include the punji sticks, which were these sharpened bamboo coated in either poison, feces, or even urine, which could cause immediate infection if stabbed. Another one is the cartridge trap. When soldiers stepped on this trap, a nail acting as a firing pin shoots bullets straight up at the victim. We also have the mace, which is a tripwire trap that triggers a 40-pound spiked ball that swings from a tree and gets stuck onto its victims. These are only a small list of the booby traps contained within these dense jungles. I feel like I should make a top 10 on this, but if you guys are interested to see, here are some other traps. Terrifying, right? At number 9 spot, we have Operation Wandering Soul. The sounds coming from the Vietnam War definitely ranks one of the highest in terms of pure horror. With the Viet Cong hiding in the dense jungles, nowhere to be seen, Americans knew that they needed to bring their morale down without the use of firearms. So in the middle of the night, they would commence Operation Wandering Soul. This is a way for Americans to demoralize the Viet Cong by playing eerie sounds and altered voices on speakers. These sounds were supposed to mimic a wandering soul because in Vietnamese culture, if a proper burial is not done, the soul of the deceased will wander the earth as a malevolent spirit. And during the Vietnam War, many soldiers didn't get a proper burial. The most famous of their recordings was named Ghost Tape Number 10, and the best way to explain it is just to play it for you guys. At number 8 spot, we have Agent Orange. With the jungle being an issue for American soldiers, they decided to use a controversial weapon known as Agent Orange. I warn you, this one is pretty cruel. Agent Orange was a herbicide mixture which contained a dangerous chemical known as dioxin. For those who don't know, dioxin is extremely toxic and can cause skin lesions, developmental problems, immune system damage, and can cause cancer. They estimate that around 3 million Vietnamese people had been affected by Agent Orange during the war, with a recorded of up to 150,000 children born with serious birth defects due to this chemical. Other than the lives this chemical took, the worst part about this was that the dioxin could remain in the soils for decades. This has caused Agent Orange to have detrimental effects to this day. After seeing its destructive power, the US decided to ban Agent Orange in 1971. They took it to the Johnston Atoll and destroyed the last one in 1978. At our number 7 spot, we have My Lai Massacre. This could possibly be one of America's worst war crimes they have ever committed, so it's pretty dark just for the warning. On March 16, 1968, a platoon of US soldiers brutally massacred a total up to 347 unarmed civilians at My Lai. They were told inside that Viet Cong were in the area, but when they arrived there, they weren't there. Despite no sign of hostility, Lieutenant William Calley gave the orders for them to open fire on the villagers. The victims included men, women, children, and even infants. After they violated and mutilated the villagers, they went on to burn the village along with slaughtering all of their livestock. It was a complete war crime. It wasn't until an army pilot named Hugh Thompson was walking when he noticed bodies and bodies of civilians as he approached the gunfire. But as he approached the gunfire, he noticed that it was his own comrade shooting. In a change of events, Hugh gave them the orders to stop or he would open fire on them. A total of 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses, but only William Calley would be convicted and found guilty of taking the lives of 22 villagers. He was given a life sentence. This event will remain a huge stain on the US military for a long time. At a number 6 spot, we have the Ace of Spades. Another example of psychological warfare done by the US was the Ace of Spades. And yes, I'm talking about the playing card. So for background info, the US Airborne Division used to put an Ace of Spades on their helmet for good luck. Fast forward to the Vietnam War and the US soldiers made it a tradition to leave an Ace of Spades on the helmets of deceased Vietnamese soldiers. Soon the card would be associated with death to both the Vietnamese and the Americans. Eventually, as more Viet Cong saw this happening, their morale would go down and the Americans knew this. So Charlie Company asked the US playing card company to supply them with crates filled with the Ace of Spades cards, which were labeled as Bicycle Secret Weapon upon arrival. And they used all these cards and they dropped them all over Vietnamese villages and jungles to frighten them. The Americans would continue to use this to taunt them by keeping it on their helmet as an anti-peace sign. This card would be later known as the Death Card. Right in the hump of our list, we have napalm. The Vietnam War had its fair share of destructive weapons, but nothing comes close to napalm, which would have been the worst weapon used in a war since the atomic bomb. Napalm, in simple terms, is basically liquid fire or a firebomb fuel gel mixture. It would often have a gelling powder composed of naphthalene and palmitate mixed with gasoline to form a sticky combustible substance. substance. Its sticky nature is the reason why it was so devastating when it released. The substance would stick onto its victims all while burning them alive, or at least causing 4th or 5th degree burns. The area napalm can cover up to 2,500 square yards, which would be completely engulfed in fire. The reason for these bombs in the first place was to support ground troops and to demoralize the enemy. Burning alive has got to be one of the worst ways to go, and seeing this fire would literally be seeing hell on earth. It eventually got banned in 1980 by the United Nations and listed as a war crime. Glad to know this one is gone, but the fact we got to see its powers is terrifying for the future. At number 4 spot, we have the AK-47 over the M16. During the war, American troops would abandon their American-owned M16 assault rifles to use the Viet Cong's AK-47 instead. This was a reason because the M16 was just not as reliable as the AK-47. First, the US changed their ammunition sizes without notifying, and it caused a lot of these guns to jam at pretty random times, which you could imagine would be pretty inconvenient in a gunfight. Second, the M16 couldn't be handled in jungle terrain. It would regularly jam when mud seeped into the gun. I mean, let's compare the two. The AK-47 is a 7.62mm gas-operated assault rifle with the capability to shoot up to 600 rounds per minute. It's claimed to be the most powerful due to the fact it doesn't break or even jam or even overheat. I mean, I don't even need to mention the M16, it has nothing compared to the AK-47. At number 3 spot, we have the Coochie tunnels. Deep inside the jungles were not only booby traps, but a system of underground tunnels for the Viet Cong to hide and move around unnoticed. These were known as the Coochie tunnels. These were a network of underground tunnels stretching more than 124 miles long. Although these tunnels were known internationally from the Vietnam War, Vietnamese did this well before, back in the 1940s during the War for Independence from the French. However, it wasn't until the Vietnam War where the tunnels would be dug for miles, with reports saying that the tunnels traveled from the outskirts of Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. These tunnels were by far anywhere near safe. Not only did you have to worry about the tunnels collapsing due to the poor construction of it, there would be snakes and scorpions and other booby traps inside of these tunnels. It's said that 45,000 Vietnamese men and women passed away defending these tunnels during the war. At number 2 spot, we have the massacre at Hue. Hue was one of the longest and bloodiest bouts during the Vietnam War, lasting a total of 26 days. During that time, up to 6,000 civilians and prisoners of war were abused, tortured, and executed at random. The Viet Cong believed this to be a cleansing of the area to anyone who opposed the rule and those who were invading their country. This battle was part of the Tet Offensive, which is when North Vietnam launched a grand-scale assault on every city in South Vietnam. The Viet Congs had a total of 80,000 troops ready before this assault, and despite the Americans knowing about this prior, they were still caught off guard. At a number 1 spot, we have Welcome with Flowers. The earliest Americans participating in the Vietnam War worked for the Office of Strategic Services, which served as the CIA's forerunner. As early as 1954, they were assisting the French and Southern governments of Saigon. Marines made their first official ground landing in Da Nang in 1965, beginning the first formal ground operation. Instead of a D-Day invasion, local women and flowers were welcomed to the troops. This would forever be eerie because of what happened following this event. The Vietnam War was brutal for both sides, and this side of friendliness is so uncharacteristic of the time. Who knows, the Vietnamese girls who put the flowers on the US soldiers could have been the future victims of their firearms, making this one the top of our list. At a number 10 spot, we have Almost Had a War Over a Tree. 2 US Army officers named Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett were axed and butchered until they passed from North Koreans while trying to trim a tree in the DMZ. This would later be known as the Korean Axe Murder Incident. The tree was blocking a checkpoint view, which is why the US decided to chop it in the first place. As you would expect, when the US caught wind that the soldiers passed away in a foreign country, they quickly took action. They created Operation Paul Bunyan, which is named after a mythical lumberjack from North American lore. The operation was very simple. Go to the DMZ and chop it down, except they came with a little few friends of their own. This included hundreds of soldiers armed with machine guns, grenade launchers, and chainsaws. And if that wasn't enough to make this more American, they brought in a 23 vehicle convoy with a tank, 20 utility helicopters, and 7 attack helicopters. Oh, you thought I was done? They also brought in B-52s, F-4s, F-5s, F-111s, and also a carrier which was offshore and a nuclear-capable bomber circulating the area. If you guess that the North Koreans didn't do anything, you are right. At number 9 spot, we have videos of nuclear destruction. Okay, first things first, North Korea has no internet. Well, except for high-level officials and some schools, but that's pretty much it. This means their media spreads like a wildfire. in a desert. The only thing that did catch fire is when North Korea featured a video simulation of a nuclear missile striking with what appears to be somewhere in the United States, as you can see the flag burning by the end of the video. This video was unveiled during a military parade marking the 105th birthday of Kim Il-sung. This video caused a lot of controversies, especially when it came at a time when the tensions were super high between the US and the Hermit State. For reference, this was in 2017, and by that time North Korea had done a ton of missile testing, and to make things more worrisome, North Korea test launched a suspected intercontinental ballistic missile into the sea this year. At number 8 spot, we have a betrayal at the death camps. North Korea is known for their cruel punishment and their horrendous living conditions. Put these two together and you have some of the worst death camps in the world. Just to give you a little bit of what happens on the inside, many of the prisoners were kept to the brink of starvation. They are forced to do physical demanding labor for hours, torture, subject to chemical experimentation, and sometimes prisoners would be randomly executed, sometimes because the guard didn't like them. One specific story from the Mirror has Shin Dong-hyuk share his experiences in these death camps. When he was 13 years old, he overheard his mother planning to escape the camp. Since he was practically born on the camp, all he knew was to obey and report anything bad in the eyes of North Korea. So he ratted his mom out. He would then recall watching his mom and his brother being dragged out and publicly executed in front of his very eyes. The worst part about this is that at the time he believed he did good because he claimed this is the type of brainwashing he underwent at the camp. At number 7 spot, we have Otter Warm Beer. Warm Beer was a student from UCLA and decided it was time to go somewhere outside of the box. He then went on a trip to North Korea through a Chinese company called Young Pioneer Tours, which is still one of the biggest tours to this day. In the hotel he was staying at, there was a forbidden floor, but he went there anyway and stole a political poster off the wall. This was all caught on film. This is all because a church in Hawaii that he was a part of wanted him to do it. During his confession speech on February 2016, he said this:
I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself, and of their very fair and square legal procedures in the DPR Korea.
This is a load of barnacles.
Then on March that same year, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. Negotiations happened, but it wasn't until June 2017 when North Korea released Otto. Except he was in a coma after taking a sleeping pill. It wasn't until he was flown out to the US where he passed away. After this incident, the US government decided to ban all American tourists from visiting North Korea altogether. Another reason not to visit this place. At number 6 spot, we have North Korean ghost ships. Hundreds of abandoned boats from North Korea wash up on Japanese and Russian coastlines each year. Some of the vessels contain the crew's remains, but they're usually just a pile of bones. These ghost ships are thought to be the result of North Korean fishermen becoming lost at sea and dying from malnutrition or weather exposure. The ships are typically old and lack stronger engines, and I mean, it's from North Korea. They're pretty much still living in the 1980s still. However, after an investigation was done, they found that these boats are actually sent out from China as a way for them to fish illegally in North Korean waters, which violates UN sanctions completely. Right in the hump of our list, we have Ryugyong Hotel. Sorry if I mispronounced that. This 105-star hotel in Pyongyang was completed in 1992, but by that time it didn't function as a hotel at all. The building was hollow-less and had no windows, which meant complete darkness on the inside. Kim Jong-un wanted this hotel to be the biggest and best hotel in the world, but it completely fell short from that goal. It still remains empty to this day. It's literally just a large structure just overlooking the city, and it's more scary to think that no one actually goes into that building. And in fact, this is the world's tallest unoccupied building. Now many theorists have claimed this building isn't empty and it harbors something more sinister inside. This may be a stretch, but online communities have mentioned that SCPs and other governmental projects are being kept secret in this building, hence why it will never truly open up to the public. At number 4 spot, we have Room 39. Room 39 is a secretive North Korean organization that figures out ways to get funds for Kim Jong-un. This room is in a ruling workers' party building in Pyongyang. The main goal of this room is basically to make sure that Kim and his family never run out of funds, and most of these ways are through illegal means. Legally, they invest in many different precious metals and currencies and some companies, but illegally, which is where they make most of their money, they allegedly make their money through means of narcotics, human trafficking, and most famous, counterfeiting money. The North Koreans are so good at creating counterfeit US dollars that they created a super note, which is supposedly 1-for-1 of a US $100 bill. Some people in the US have actually been prosecuted for distributing the money that was produced in this very room. This room also serves as a place for arms dealing, where they usually sell to terrorist organizations and dictators for money. At our number 3 spot, we have Kim Jong-il's tomb. His tomb is on this list because it just gives everyone other than North Koreans the utter creeps. The mausoleum contains the embalmed body of North Korea's late leader Kim Jong-il, and it was open to tourists for some time. During that time, you could see the leader in this glass box with his body resting inside. Just a creepy sight to see in general. let alone a dictator who causes people to suffer. At number 2 spot, we have the Shincheon massacre. Now before I get started with this one is all up for speculation. North Korea has said this happened while the US has said it was falsified, but forget about what we care about, let's just care about the North Korean side right now. They claim that a mass murder took place in the 1950s during the Korean War. In the town of Shincheon, American soldiers supposedly took the lives of over 35,000 civilians in the course of 52 days. If this was true, this would make it one of the most deadliest massacres in history, but that's if. Now this event is memorialized in the Shincheon Museum of American War Atrocities. Yup, there's a museum on horrible violent acts, and some of the paintings in here are pretty disturbing. At our number 1 spot, we have an election. This one is probably the least scariest on this list, but the fact that people have no right to vote for their leaders is definitely terrifying for me at least. Voting in North Korea is actually a thing. When you're supposed to go in for voting, many people show up super early to show a sign of loyalty. But when they're there to vote, it's just mandatory to vote for the SPA party, otherwise known as the Supreme People's Assembly. There's also supposedly private voting booths, but seriously, what do you have to hide? If you do attempt to vote for someone else, the police will follow you and find any ways to incriminate you or declare you insane. Coming at a number 10 spot, we have the Battle of Cold Harbor. Said to be one of the most haunted battlefields in the United States, it was here that over 150,000 men fought a long, gruesome battle, which ended up claiming the lives of 15,000 of them. As the war finished, it was reported that the lack of medical assistance led to dugouts being crammed with both the living and the dead, and those who passed away couldn't even get proper burials. The conditions of the battlefield made this place a living hell for those who had to fight in it, and now it's reported that those who visit the area experience paranormal occurrences such as smelling the distinct scent of burned gunpowder or a fog that would appear and disappear in the area, which could be resembling the thick gun smoke from the past battle. Other people report hearing the cries and the screaming of dying soldiers waiting for someone to bury them properly. Restless souls are scattered throughout the park, which is why it makes sense that people get an overwhelming sense of sorrow and fear when they walk on the field. Coming at number 9, we have the Clark Air Base Hospital. This is one of the few places deemed to be haunted, not just in the Philippines, but in the whole world, according to the Ghost Hunters International. Season 1, episode 20, named Unknown Soldiers, if you guys want to check out the episode. The hospital was used during World War II and the Vietnam War, and it also served as an asylum to the wounded and the dying American soldiers. This is why many people around the area claimed it was the most haunted place in the Philippines. It's said that the trauma and countless deaths from those conflicts have left their mark on the spirit's presence in the hospital. The place is currently abandoned, which kind of gives it this more supernatural look to it, but it said that if you visit the hospital and sleep within 8 hours after the visit, you'll experience extreme nightmares and even intense lucid dreaming for a whole entire week. Number 8, napalm. The Vietnam War had its fair share of destructive weapons, but nothing came close to napalm, which could have been the worst weapon to be used in a war since the atomic bomb. Napalm in simple terms is basically liquid fire or firebomb fuel gel mixture. It often used to have a gelling powder composed of naphthalene and palmitate mixed with gasoline to form a sticky combustible substance. Its sticky nature is the whole reason why it's so devastating, because when it was released, the substance would stick onto its victims all while burning them alive, or at least causing them 4th or 5th degree burns. The area napalm can cover is up to 2,500 square yards, which could be completely engulfed in fire. The reason for these bombs in the first place was to support ground troops and to demoralize the enemy. I mean, burning alive has got to be one of the worst ways to go, and seeing this fire would truly be like seeing hell on earth. It eventually got banned in 1980 by the United Nations and listed as a war crime. Glad to see this one is gone, but the fact that we got to see its powers is truly terrifying for what comes next in the future. Number 7, the Belitz Hospital. This scary looking military hospital is located in Belitz, Germany. The hospital is situated near Berlin in this little town called Belitz. It was originally built at the beginning of the 20th century to treat tuberculosis, with the entire facility comprising around 60 buildings. And for its time there, it had many deaths coming from the illness. It was then used as a military hospital during the World Wars, and was also used for German experiments during World War II. During the final days of the war, the facility was captured by the Soviet forces and became their biggest military treatment center outside of Russia until 1994. Small parts of it are still in use for neurological research and treatment, but most are left abandoned. Its last reported use was around 1994 to 1995. Now the place looks downright creepy. With its dark hallways and its peeling paints, this is a place you definitely don't want to go. Number 6, the Shincheon massacre. Now before I get this one started, this one is all up for speculation. North Korea said this happened while the US said it was falsified. And we all know about the lies that North Korea produces. But forget about that, we just care about the North Korean side today. They claim that a mass murder took place in 1950 during the Korean War. In the town of Sinchon, American soldiers supposedly took the lives of over 35,000 civilians in the course of 52 days. If this was true, this would make it one of the most deadliest massacres in all of history, but that's if. Now this event is memorialized in the Sinchon Museum of American War Atrocity. Yup, there's a museum on horrible violent acts. And some of the paintings in here are pretty disturbing, so I'll just give you guys a little bit of a snippet. In the hump of our list, we have Operation Wandering Soul. The sounds coming from the Vietnam War definitely ranks one of the highest in terms of pure horror. With the Viet Cong hiding in the dense jungles, nowhere to be seen, Americans knew they had to bring their morale down without the use of firearms. So in the middle of the night, they would commence Operation Wandering Soul. This was a way for Americans to demoralize the Viet Cong by playing these eerie sounds and altered voices on these loud speakers. These sounds were supposed to mimic a wandering soul. Because in Vietnamese culture, if a proper burial is not done, the soul of the deceased will wander the earth as a malevolent spirit. And during the Vietnam War, many soldiers didn't get proper burial. The most famous of the recordings was named Ghost Tape Number 10, and the best way to explain it is just to play it for you guys. Number 4, Bloody Bucket Bridge. During the time of the Civil War, an African-American couple moved and settled into Wauchula, Florida. The woman worked as a midwife and she was pretty content with her situation. As time went on, the wife started to act unstable, and it was all due to the memory of her own child being stripped from her during the Civil War. Haunted by the event, she took it on her own to suffocate babies as they were being born. And what's worse is that she told the parents that it was a stillbirth. Then it said that she would take the remains of the baby to her husband, who would help her grind them up and place them in a bucket. Later, she would take these buckets to the bridge and dump them over into the water, hence Bloody Bucket Bridge. People claim that if you visit the bridge on a full moon night, the water will appear red in color, looking like the blood of the baby she took. Number 3, Genghis Khan. If you don't think Genghis Khan is a scary guy, you're just privileged you don't live in his time period. First of all, he is responsible for the deaths of over 40 million people, and he is arguably the greatest military leader of all time because of it. The Khan regime at its peak covered over 9 million square miles of territory, which ranged from Central Asia to places as far as Poland and Korea. The reason he was able to take over this much area was largely due to the way he commanded his army, their ruthlessness, tactic, and extraordinary speed. In one example, Khan's son-in-law was killed by a stray arrow during 1221. He then took his whole army and attacked the city of Nishapur, which is modern day Iran, and it was said that he killed everybody in the city, which was believed to be 1.75 million people, in a single hour. The victims were beheaded and their skulls were piled up in a large pyramid in the middle of the town. His campaign would prove to be more evil than death alone, but we don't need to mention anything else. Besides destroying entire civilization, Genghis Khan's conquest may have also helped to spread the bubonic plague all across Asia and Europe, thus killing another 75 to 200 million people. Glad to know we don't have this type of guy around today. Number 2, the Antietam battlefield. Combine advanced technology with unstructured tactics and poor decision making, and you have the Battle of Antietam, otherwise known as the bloodiest single day in American history. For those who don't know, this is the battle that wounded or took the lives of 23,000 people. And remember, that's in one single day. The iconic Bloody Lane is the spot where both sides met and fought for their lives. It was a sunken part of the road, and considering it was where the most activity was, it's understandable that many bodies were stacked on this road, hence the name Bloody Lane. Gunfire and the smell of gunpowder have been reported in the area even when there's no one around to this day. The most convincing of the reports is some of Baltimore schoolboys who walked Bloody Lane and heard singing out in the fields. They said it sounded like a chant or even a Christmas song decked the halls. Number 1, the Nottingham Road Hotel. The Railway Hotel was first completed in 1891 and soon blooming socially, and then it also served as a popular stop for British soldiers during the Boer War. Today, the Railway Hotel has now been named the Nottingham Road Hotel, and a lot of things happened at this hotel. This hotel is supposedly haunted by a ghost named Charlotte. Charlotte was a beautiful lady who served the man during the war, so one day she supposedly fell in love with the soldier, and then he ended up passing away. A deeply saddened Charlotte then threw herself off the balcony, leading to her demise. So now she haunts the hotel and has been spotted by many guests over the years. The balcony she was staying at and jumped off of was at room 10, and this is where most of the paranormal activity is said to have happened. Guests in the room report seeing her on the balcony still, and sometimes they would claim that she would fold their clothes for them. Sightings of Charlotte are common, with even surveillance showing a ghostly white woman appearing in the bars, around the corridors, and even down the stairs. Well, these are the top 10 scary war stories that are true. What do you guys think about this list? Should we do some more war stuff? Let me know in the comment section below. Like and subscribe to this page for some more content. I'm your host Andrew, and I hope you guys have a scary day.